I think my favorite type of character in a gacha game is what I like to call an ugly duckling character. Characters that are bad, but then become really good. Not because they were buffed, but rather the game around them changed. Think Jing Yuan from Honkai Star Rail, a character who was considered generally outclassed and mediocre until the game around him started to support Elation more. Jing Yuan didn't directly receive any buffs, but instead, the game introduced new relics and characters that made him better. Or Zane in Fire Emblem Heroes, who copies the stats of his opponents, making him always scale with a constantly shifting meta. But as interesting as these two cases are, I'm here today to talk about the greatest, ugliest duckling in all of gacha gaming. This is the story of Limbus Company's Sunshower Heathcliff, or as I'll be calling him, Potential Man. Limbus Company is a gacha game with a set cast of 12 characters. You pull in the gacha for alternate versions of them called identities. It's sort of like costumes with their own set of 3 unique skills, plus a defensive move. You can only equip one identity at a time, meaning that if one character gets 2 really good identities, you have to pick one of them. You can't use both at once. You'll bring anywhere between 5 to 7, usually 6, into a battle, and the rest will provide support buffs while benched. You can also pull Ego, which are special attacks that can be equipped to any identity. Still with me here? Good, because it only gets worse. See, ever since day 1, Heathcliff has been the owner of one of the best IDs in the entire game, R-Corp Heathcliff. R-Cliff does utterly insane amounts of damage, with the caveat of having a limited amount of bullets, which cannot be recovered upon being used, making him pretty useless after expending all 13 of his bullets. But here's the thing. The main game mode, Mirror Dungeon, consists of a gauntlet of quick battles back to back. And guess what happens when you start a new battle? That's right, bullet count goes back to 13. Along with this, R-Cliff could be slotted onto basically any type of team. Bleed team, he inflicts bleed with his 2nd skill. Rupture, inflicts it with his 3rd skill. Charge, when he has 5 or more charge, he gets buffed. And at launch, the only ego Heathcliff had was charge-based. To top this all off, he inflicts Fragile, which just makes all your units deal more damage. I'd say he's even gotten better as of recent thanks to the new meta definers, the ring IDs. These guys do goofy amounts of damage that increases depending on the amount of status effects the opponent has. Not only does R-Cliff inflict 3 different status effects, one of which being Bleed, which is the most important status for the ring IDs, but he also has access to Holiday, an ego which inflicts a random variety of status effects on the opponent. And the cherry on top? R-Cliff's defensive type is Evade, which is seen as undeniably the best defensive type in the game. R-Cliff was a massive meme in the community, seen as the gold standard for identities, a staple on any Mirror Dungeon team. Memes, art, even a discussion between AI presidents about his viability. The best part was that the blood splatter texture on his art was missing at launch, so it looked like he was just, I thought you had a wife, man. Needless to say, any Heathcliff identity that came out had to compete with R-Cliff, especially since it would take until Season 3 for the game to implement incentives to play with different identities more often. March 17th, 2023. The first Heathcliff identity since launch was announced, N-Corp Heathcliff, who I'm gonna call Kleinhammer Heathcliff in order to avoid confusion with R-Cliff. A measly 2-star placed on a banner alongside the heavily anticipated and hyped up M-Corp Faust, who could honestly justify a video all her own thanks to not only her unique properties, but the simp wars that followed her announcement. And upon releasing, Kleinhammer Heathcliff was immediately seen as one of the worst identities in the game. Not only was his power underwhelming, but of course he had to compete with R-Cliff's nonsense. The worst part was that N-Corp's signature status, Nails, was a bleed effect, meaning you had 0 reason to ever use Kleinhammer Heathcliff. R-Cliff's right there! He inflicts bleed, he synergizes with N-Corp thanks to having Wrath and Envy skills. All skills in this game correspond with a different 7 deadly sin, and chaining sins with each other leads to more damage and causes passives to activate. The only reason you could ever justify using Kleinhammer Heathcliff is, I guess, for the Lust res? See, N-Corp Faust passive, Whistles, activates when you chain 4 Lust skills. This passive restores sanity for the 2 units with the least of it, and applies a special buff if they're from N-Corp. But if you really care that much, you could always give N-Corp Merceau the boot due to A, not being very good, and B, not having any Lust skills. Go replace them with Ting Tang Hong Lu, a unit who not only has Lust skills, but also deals increased damage to opponents with bleed. Let's just say we all knew the real reason people were pulling on this banner. But then, the tides turned. April 27th, 2023, N-Corp Sinclair was announced. N-Corp Sinclair was an absolute game changer, redefining the meta entirely. I mentioned earlier something called sanity. See, all units have a sanity meter. The higher your sanity, the more likely you are to flip heads on your attacks, which gain power based on if they landed heads or tails. And if you reach the lowest sanity possible, -45, you'd corrode, taking on the form of the last ego that unit used, and launching an untargetable attack which can hit allies as well as enemies. N-Corp Sinclair was the first ever negative coin ID, having insane rolls that lost power if he hit heads. His third skill had a starting threshold of 30 and 3 coins, meaning it could hit a whopping 90 base power, plus it did damage against robotic units, and could gain power from Fnatic, that buff N-Corp Faust passive inflicts. Arcliff had competition, and many debated who was the best unit in the game, Arcliff or N-Clair. Yet another question arose from this discussion. Who would be the next negative sanity unit? June 2nd, 2023. We're now in Season 2. Several changes have been made to the game, most of which have made it significantly harder than it used to be. Arcliff's remained the meta's reigning champion, sharing the spotlight still with N-Clair. And on this day, we finally hear the call of the second, and currently final, negative sanity unit. But it wasn't going to be so easy, because the new unit, Sun Shower, was a Heathcliff identity. His first ever 3-star identity since Arcliff. Was Arcliff gonna be topped? Would Suncliff see any use? Players were on the edges of their seats, waiting for the reveal of his kit. And finally, once it arrived, it was met with a resounding, It's impossible to explain how utterly baffling this unit is without thoroughly breaking down his kit. Sit back, I'm gonna show you some math. So, first off, it's important to discuss how Suncliff loses sanity in the first place. Let's compare him to N-Clair. N-Clair loses sanity with every attack. He loses 7 on his skill 1, 10 on his skill 2, and 15 on his skill 3. N-Clair also gains less sanity from winning clashes, and has access to a defensive skill which recovers 5 to 10 sanity on use as an emergency measure to prevent him from corroding. Plus, if you play him with a Nails team, or just N-Corp Faust, he can have his sanity further managed by her Whistle's passive, and access to several sanity recovering ego. You are given all the tools needed with N-Clair in order to have him deal the maximum damage amount as possible, while also being able to avoid corrosion. Alright, now let's see how much sanity Suncliff loses upon using his skills. Yeah, okay. So reviewing the information here, it seems that he loses literally no sanity on skill use. So you're probably looking at me right now and saying, "Sure, what do you mean he doesn't lose sanity? How are you supposed to get him into negative sanity if he doesn't lose any?" Excellent question. See, you're supposed to apply self-syncing. Syncing is a negative status effect, which causes the opponent to be dealt sanity damage on hit. So you're supposed to, get this, gain syncing from using attacks, and then purposefully lose clashes, and let yourself take damage in order to use up that syncing and lose sanity. Now, what's important here is his passive, which converts syncing into protection every turn for a maximum of 5 protection, which means damage taken will be halved. The syncing converted will also decrease sanity as if he were hit, and he also gains extra attack power when hit. It's alright, that doesn't sound that bad. So long as he gains a sufficient amount of syncing with his attacks, he sounds pretty good, right? Suncliff rolls a 3 to 5 on speed, which is just objectively worse than Arcliff, who rolls a 3 to 7, and gains buffs at 6 or higher speed, and increases his speed further at 5 or more charge. His skill 1 starts at a threshold of 6. A threshold of 6. Not a minimum, with 3 coins. For context, N-Clair, who has a skill 1 widely considered garbage, started with a threshold of 8. Sure, it only had 2 coins, but it gave N-Clair Fnatic on the next turn, so it had a use. Meanwhile, Suncliff's skill 1 gives him a whopping 1 syncing! You are not seeing things, you are not hearing things. It inflicts 1 syncing. That is 1 point of sanity lost. It also inflicts 2 syncing on the opponent, plus a syncing count of 2 if the coin landed on tails. A count is the amount of time syncing can be applied, so this is basically 4 sanity damage to the opponent. We're gonna skip over his skill 2 and go straight to his skill 3 for reasons you'll soon understand. His skill 3 has a threshold of 18, with 3 coins. It gives Suncliff 6 sinking and 3 sinking count. It inflicts rupture, and landing tails makes it inflict paralyze and fragile. So, alright, this skill actually seems pretty good. Solid rolls, inflicts some of the best statuses in the game, and gives Suncliff plenty of sinking. And I mean, just think about what it could do with those attack buffs he gets from... What? You're saying... Okay. So, just got a report in. It says here that his attack buffs will only buff his blunt attacks. And his skill 3 is Pierce. You know what, let's just go to his skill 2. Threshold of 10, 4 coins, blunt attack. This right here, this is what Suncliff needed. It's no 90 roller like Enclair, sure, but with the attack buffs, I could see it doing decent damage. And hey, look at that, the coin effects amplify his damage. When below negative 15 sanity, plus 2 final power. Then on the final coin, spend 5 sinking to deal 20% more wait, spend 5 sinking? Hold on, slow down. What do you mean spend 5 sinking? He needs that sinking. He needs to be mentally ill. Like, okay, if you even get 5 sinking to begin with, which, let's be real, you can only really do that with his skill 3, you're gonna want that sinking in order to retain his sanity levels. You want me to seriously not just be at negative 15 sanity, but then also have surplus sinking I can just throw away in order to make sure the skill does admittedly pretty good damage? You took my only sinking! Now I'm gonna starve! Now, this also inflicts rupture, and on Tails hit, it bursts Tremor. Tremor is a status effect that has to be stacked before you can burst it. Why does he burst Tremor? There is 0 Tremor in his entire kit. This does literally nothing. At the very least, I can say his defensive skill is pretty good. Yeah, it's solid, it's consistent with his hilariously inconsistent kit. It gives him 3 sinking, inflicts self-paralyze on Tails hit, which makes it so that even if he flips ahead, he won't lose coin power, and inflicts some bonus rupture for good measure. Plus, it's a good way to consistently trigger his passive and lose sanity. So, why exactly is his kit like, this? How is it this scattershot? The answer is faction resonance. All characters in this game come from a faction, and you're usually encouraged to build teams around these factions. Like how I mentioned earlier with N-Corp, it's generally a good idea to play N-Corp units together, as they're built to play off each other. Suncliff is a member of the Technology Liberation Alliance, a group where the kindest thing I can say about them is that the members mostly work in isolation. Spicebush Yisong is even seen as one of the best units in the game. See, the thing is, these guys have entirely different playstyles from each other, with Suncliff existing to tie them with a neat little bow. Spicebush Yisong does sinking, Talisman Sinclair does rupture, and Sloshing Ishmael does tremor. So Suncliff inflicts sinking, rupture, and burst tremor. This is actually a really cool idea. A group of units that don't seem like they'd work together, but do so long as they have their ringleader. At least that's what I would say if this team wasn't just objectively bad to play. The Sloshmel is widely agreed to be the worst tremor unit in the game, and that is saying something. You'd be lucky to even inflict a good amount of tremor with her. And if you make the mistake of bursting tremor with her, she'll remove 4 tremor count in order to inflict 5 rupture instead. That's literally just 5 damage. She removes 4 valuable tremor count, something that only she can inflict here on a TLA team, and replaces it with a pitiful amount of rupture. And her skills are just really terrible. Look at these. Her purpose is to do nothing, and I'm not just saying that to be funny. Her passive gives her shield if she deals 0 damage. She can only inflict tremor consistently by losing clashes, and heaven forbid you try and burst tremor with her. Look at her artwork. She's literally only here to stand there, do nothing, and be laughed at. Talisman Sinclair is just kind of fine. He's got a solid rupture output, and his signature status, Talisman, is honestly really good. I mean, his clashing's kind of garbage, and I honestly have only ever used him for his bench passive, but that's not to say that he's actively detrimental to a team, unlike some people. And then, as I said earlier, Spice Song is one of the best units in the game, whoop-de-doo. He deals consistently good damage, has an AoE skill, ooh la la, and can inflict Sinking Deluge, which I can't be bothered to explain, so just know it's really good. But by trying to do everything, Suncliff just ends up doing nothing. He's nothing, and that's the saddest part. Such an interesting kit, such a cool idea. but the execution is nothing. His number one fear, being thrown aside and forgotten, is, unfortunately, his fate. He became nothing but a talking point for bad kits, a punchline when discussing Arcliff's stranglehold on the meta. July 20th, 2023. Uptie 4 is released. This allowed players to ascend units one more time, offering updated kits for everyone. This actually breathed life into a ton of units, including Kleinhammer Heathcliff. Thanks to this, he was now considered a necessity on N-Corp teams. He now gained coin power when paired with other N-Corp units, and could inflict plus coin power drop, the status that many consider to be the best in the game due to outright lowering enemy rolls. He did it. He broke free of Arcliff's grip. Meanwhile, Suncliff got nothing. He gained some more sinking on Clash Lose with his skill 1. His skill 2 was made a lot better, raising the negative 15 coin power to 3, and adding an extra 2 on top of that when at negative 25. Something that was, not really easy to accomplish, but hey, if you did, you were eating good. And now his counter gives him 5 sinking. It's sad in a way. Uptie 4 was basically required to play Suncliff, but you still had no reason to use him. Uptie 4 was extremely costly. Basically all the fan discussion at the time was over who to uptie first, since you would not be able to uptie all your units. All the while, Kleinhammer Heathcliff found new purpose in life, and Arcliff got more bullets because of course he did. This led to the creation of what is now a legendary image. Meet Potential Man. He has good damage potential. He loses clashes on purpose for his SP. Just wait for the sanity changes. He'll be busted on newer content. 0 clash power, 0 usage, 50 ego shards wasted on Uptie 4, 100 thread also wasted. Give me AEDD, give me telepole, give me corrosion, or I retire. Mama and Papa. Lose SP on skills like Enclair, or lose SP on counter? Nah. Use passive and gain sinking to get hit on purpose to lose SP. Let's go! If and when, but never is. March 28th, 2024. Season 4 drops. And along with it, a new chapter of the main story. Canto 6, The Heartbreaking, was the Heathcliff chapter. And if the name Clear Cathy didn't make it obvious enough, Season 4 was the Heathcliff season. It was time to pay our respects to the boy and gobble up yet another classic tale of dead lovers in the series chock full of them. Heathcliff was a required unit for nearly every fight in the chapter, and by now he even had 2 new 3-star units, which were considered very good. There was just one problem. None of them were suited for this chapter, a chapter where every enemy resisted pierce damage, making 2 of Heathcliff's 3-star units, including Arcliff, unideal. And even if Arcliff had a type advantage, this chapter had a ton of super long battles. So, I need more bullets! But, okay, even with the type disadvantages, you can still brute force your way through. That's where Heathcliff's unique status comes into play. In every battle, Heathcliff has Bereavement. This makes him lose 10 sanity every turn if he's above negative 15 sanity, lose 2 sanity when hit, and gain offense level up, and then also gain 3 attack power every turn where he's under 0 sanity. That's when everything came together. That was the moment when Potential Man reached his potential. And don't you think for a second he was only good in the new story content, because several new items were added to Mirror Dungeon that basically exist to make Potential Man into a monster. Give him Paralyze every turn, deal extra damage with negative coin skills, and always be at negative 15 sanity or lower. Just get better by being a member of the TLA. And with all this came the new, greatest Limbus Company meme.
Potential Man. That's a funny one, mate. Even the missus had a giggle. Speaking of, you'll come to the wedding, right, Clockface? Yeah, bring the fish lash too. Linton? What about that sod? I put him in the ground, simple as. Not that it was hard. One umbrella thwack and the wanker was down. Used to that happening though. Carmen, what the bloody hell are you blabbing on about? Got a few loose screws?
To top it all off, Potential Man was featured in a cutscene, while Arcliff was nowhere to be seen. Suck on that, quick suppression jacks. So, where does that leave us today? Oh, unfortunately, Potential Man's moment in the spotlight is kinda over. Yeah, he's infinitely more usable now, but Arcliff's still Arcliff. However, the fandom will never forget Potential Man. They'll never forget his valuable service, or the legendary moment that was his potential coming to fruition. I'll always consider him a beautiful swan instead of the ugly duckling he used to be, even if in actuality he still looks like a hobo. So, until next time, remember to water your Potential Man daily, and don't forget to give him AEDD, Telepole, and now binds as well. Salute Dongbeck or something, she died so Potential Man could be given life. Oh man, I didn't even mention the guy that soloed the final boss with She-Cliff.